At the United Methodist General Conference, who leads the legislative committees, and how do those officers get elected? Great question. In this video, I explain how the legislative committee officers are elected. In my last video, I described the leadership roles in legislative committees and how to evaluate whether to run for one of those roles. You can find a link to watch it at the end. Legislative committees meet for the first time after the opening of General Conference. Each one is initially led by a bishop and an organizing secretary, appointed by the Council of Bishops and the Secretary of General Conference, respectively. After an orientation, the presiding bishop's first order of business is the election of officers. Those officer positions are a chairperson, vice chairperson, secretary, and subcommittee chairpersons. Nominations are taken first for the chairperson position. It is common for those running for an office to be nominated by someone else, but you may also nominate yourself. After the chairperson is elected, nominations and elections proceed for the other officer positions, and the newly elected officers take up leadership of the legislative committee. The election process goes very quickly. If you were observing a legislative committee, it might surprise you to see how fast delegates get selected for these important leadership roles. Most of the committee members don't know each other very well yet. How do they decide who to vote for? What you don't see is the work and conversations that take place in the months leading up to General Conference. The list of delegates in each legislative committee is published in the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate several months before General Conference. Look at who else will be in your committee. Do you know any of them? Do other members of your delegation know any of them? Of those on the committee known to you or to someone you know, is there someone who would make a good chairperson? Or if you think you want to run for one of the positions, can you get connected with anyone in your legislative committee to let them know and perhaps ask them to nominate you? Caucuses also look at the legislative committee lists and share information with their constituent delegates about potential leaders for each committee. If you are affiliated with one or more caucuses, ask the caucus leadership who would be recommended as officers, or tell them that you're interested and why you think you would make a good committee officer, so that they can pass your name along to other constituents who are in your legislative committee. The other opportunity to get connected with other members of your legislative committee is at one of the briefings or orientations just before General Conference starts. These are sessions designed to share information that is helpful to specific groups, such as Central Conference delegates, youth and young adult delegates, or first-time delegates. They also offer a chance to meet and talk with some of the people who will be in your legislative committee. Briefings and orientations will be listed when the General Conference schedule is published, either in the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate or earlier on the General Conference website. What else should you consider when you elect legislative committee officers? The United Methodist Church believes that diversity in our representation and leadership is important. That includes electing diverse slates of committee officers. Doing so helps ensure that the voices and experiences of as many United Methodist constituencies as possible are represented in leadership in our legislative committees. At the 2016 General Conference, 58% of delegates were from the United States, but 100% of the legislative committee chairpersons were from the U.S. 1/3 of total delegates were women, but 2/3 of the secretary positions were held by women, and half of those secretaries were the only female officer of their committee. 1/3 of the committees had all clergy officers, while General Conference had 50% clergy delegates. I believe we can do better. Consider how you can work against the biases we hold to ensure a more representative pool of people is nominated to lead your legislative committee. When your legislative committee elects officers, pay attention to who is elected for each position and speak up if those elected so far overrepresent a certain category. In doing so, you will help make sure that General Conference's decision-making process fully represents the United Methodist Church. If you want to remind yourself of how the whole legislative process works at General Conference and what role legislative committees play in the process, I explained that in a video. The link is above. And as I mentioned at the top of this video, In my last video, I listed the Legislative Committee leadership positions and what they entail, as well as what to consider before running for one of those positions. The link to that video will appear on the credits screen in just a moment. Please comment below with any questions or suggestions for future videos. You may also subscribe to get notices about my future videos. Thanks for watching.